Today we are speaking with Laurie Staples. Hello, Laurie.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having us here in your home in Marietta, South Carolina.
Welcome.
I'm super excited because I've never been on the west side of the state, and I know you said this is upstate, right?
Yes, they call this the upstate, and this little particular part of the upstate is called the dark corner.
Why is that?
It goes back to Prohibition, and all the gangsters used to come here and get their hooch. So this was a place where there wasn't a lot of law, and there were a lot of stills. And you can still, at times, find stills, they say, when you go off traipsing through the woods.
Well, that's really interesting. So what you were saying, there's other parts to the state. There's the beach.
Yes, I learned this year in geography that we have the lowlands, which are the beach, that are closer to sea level. Then you have mid-state, which is Columbia, and it kind of goes from where South Carolina and North Carolina meet out by 95, and then west, and then that, like I said, that's the Midlands, and then where the mountains, the foothills are, were the upstate.
Okay, because we just traveled from Nashville to here, and we went through a lot of mountains.
Yes, yes.
Beautiful.
On this side of the Eastern Continental Divide, which is about 12 miles north, the weather's much milder, but just on the other side of that Eastern Continental Divide, which is just north of the border between South Carolina and North Carolina, the weather gets much harsher.
Yes, we drove through that actually. We drove through, Cassie was driving. We drove through a lot of rain there, and it was pretty heavy too. So can you tell everybody what your passion is and kind of why we have stopped in this dark corner of South Carolina?
My passion is service. To me, life is about so much more than just me, myself, and I. I got to have a reason to get up in the morning, and the reason to get up in the morning is I have a mission somewhere, somehow, to do something for somebody else.
What does that look like for you? How do you serve?
During the school year, I live a life of service by being a speech-language pathologist with special needs kids in the public schools. And then at other times, I'm also a volunteer with the fire department. And I'm what's called a support person. So support, service, synonyms pretty much. And being 54 years old and having some health issues, one might think, what can I possibly do at the fire department? Well, I don't fight fires, that's for sure. And I decided that a long time ago that I would not fight fires because I don't understand running into a building that the rats are running out of. But anyway.
And what does your husband do again?
My husband is a fire chief. But I am an emergency medical responder, and I do whatever I can to help the firefighters do what they have to do. For example, we had a fire this week. So when we have a house fire, my job is to come out and run rehab and check the firefighters' vital signs and such when they come out of the fire and make sure they're healthy enough to go back in. And I've actually been given the authority to say, no, you can't go back in yet. And then I also make sure that they become hydrated, they stay well hydrated. I change out tanks. What else do I do? I do a lot of little different things. And then the next day, I go and I clean gear, I clean equipment, I sweep the tarp that we used, I restock the medical bag. I do whatever I can to allow the other responders to do what they have to do. So that's one thing I do. I also serve at church and things like that.
How does your husband feel about you supporting him at the firehouse? Because I, as somebody who's been married almost 29 years, look at that and say, yes, you're serving, and not even just are you serving, but you're showing support for something that your husband does, and this allows maybe you guys more time to be together.
Yes, it does. And I always ask him, are you sure I'm not traipsing on your territory? I don't want to traipse on your territory. And the funny thing is, him being the chief, frequently, he's not even there when I'm up there. For example, today, one way I served was I spent the afternoon running errands for the fire department so he could be at work doing what he has to do in order to go on vacation this weekend. And he's quite okay with that. So there was a time I'm out serving by running around town for 4 hours and he's in the office. Or the other day, he was at the fire, and I was cleaning gear back at the station, and things like that. So, yeah, there are other times when we do get to respond together and work calls and things like that. But he's command, and I'm over here. I'm
Support.
a support person, whatever I can do. And on a medical call, I actually get in there and do patient care.
I love that so much. Where do you think your start and your passion for service started for you?
I think really a heart of service is something you're born with, a heart for service. I think it can be nurtured or it can be squashed, but I think you're born with it, just like you're born with a calling. And you have to figure out what that calling is and then live up to it somehow. And I've got a whole lot of stories on that. But when did it start? Let's see. Well, I'm the oldest in my family, the oldest of 3 children, and I was the caretaker in the family. If you look at the dynamics of families that have issues, I fit a lot of those profiles. So I was the caretaker growing up. And I think that's where it started. And then I was witness, I can say my beginning in emergency medical services, I know exactly where that came from. I was, the summer between my senior year in college, we heard a car hit something. My friends and I were outside about 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. And then we heard brakes. And it sounded like it was just down the street. So we went down the street, couldn't find it. Went further out to the highway, and a 14-year-old girl had been struck by a car, and she died in my arms. And I didn't like feeling helpless. A few weeks later, when I started college, all the different clubs were outside in the quad area, you know, trying to recruit, and I'd go to the different clubs and sororities, and what are you all about? What are you all about? And sororities, oh yeah, we have lots of parties, and you get discounts at the convention, and we have lots of different social activities. And then there was the first aid squad. I went to one of the few colleges in the state that had a student-run first aid squad. So I joined the first aid squad, and I got my training. And so while I was going to college to become a teacher of the deaf, I was also getting very much involved in emergency medical services. And that's how my husband and I met. So that one little incident and me feeling helpless inspired a whole huge part of my life, not just my career and my hobbies, but my whole life, because that's where I met my husband. And life would be a very different looking animal if I hadn't responded to that day.
And you know, the thing is, they always talk about the ripple effect from different things like death, and how there's so many things occur from incidents that we'll never know about. Mm-hmm. And you know, this 14-year-old girl lost her life, but you know, you have positively impacted and supported so many through your service because of that experience, and meeting your husband was part of that for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, probably so. I joined first aid squads. I joined 2 more squads. Yeah, I wound up on 3 different first aid squads while I was in college. And then I found out I could get paid for it. So I worked on ambulances while I was in college as well. And it's funny how you talk about that ripple effect, because as I said, I was going to school for deaf ed. In 1984, when I graduated, there were no jobs in deaf ed. And I did not want to be a speech teacher and sit and do there's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't my cup of tea at the point in time.
Right.
And so I went to graduate school for deaf ed. Said, okay, I can't get a job, I'll get more education. And it's just a wacky story. I went to graduate school. I got a job as a speech teacher. It's not what I wanted to do. Then I had to renew my emergency medical technician certification, and Bob and I were engaged, and we decided that instead of taking a refresher course, we wanted to be instructors, so let's take a full course again. So we took a full course in the semester leading up to our wedding, and we went on to become EMT instructors. And so there's that ripple effect again. I've trained hundreds of people as EMTs and paramedics over the years. and so is my husband. As a matter of fact, where he is tonight is teaching an EMT class. And I am taking an EMT class again this fall so I can get further training again.
That's amazing.
It is. It's just incredible. And then after that year graduate school, I decided to go to paramedic. So I kept both careers going for many, many years.
So what kind of challenges would you say that you've had? In serving.
In serving.
Yeah, and in keeping service in your life.
Well, I had to let it go for a while. That's the whole reason I'm going back into EMT now, because I have rheumatoid arthritis. I've had it since I was a kid, and I went into remission for a number of years, and about 12 years ago it came back with a vengeance. And I had to make a decision, this is too much for me to keep everything up. And I was having great difficulty walking, so I decided I had to let my EMT and paramedic go for a while. So I've been retired from emergency medical services. I was retired about 10 years, and now I'm starting all over again at 54 years old.
You've been running all over this house since we got here, so you look like you're feeling better.
I'm doing well. If you have something to do, it motivates you to keep going. I'm very blessed. I had doctors predict when I was a kid that I'd be in a wheelchair by the time I was 21. And my doctor flipped out when he heard I joined a first aid squad, because he says, you can't do that. You're going to have lots of problems. And I think diving into that life of service is what kept me going and kept me motivated to keep going and keep putting one foot in front of the other. Getting up every morning knowing I have a purpose. And so I was a teacher during the day, paramedic nights and weekends for many, many years. And then I flip-flopped when we moved to Florida, and I ran the paramedic program in Florida for 3 years.
Do you think having your own medical issues is something that has given you the knowledge of what people need when they're not feeling well? You know, like
Absolutely.
if you're in an accident or if you have an illness, sometimes you just can't do for yourself, and it's very hard to verbalize that. Mm-hmm. Do you think that sensitivity?
Absolutely. I think that empathy, it gives me listen, I know you've broken your leg or you've hurt your arm or you're feeling like this is going to really devastate your life. It's going to set you back a bit. And I've said this to people at times or something similar. It's going to set you back a bit, but you're still breathing. You still have a mission. You still have something to accomplish. So
because that's how you feel about yourself.
Right. I have a philosophy of I give myself 24 hours to grieve something. I was diagnosed with lupus about 10 years ago, and that devastated me because when you start looking at the statistics for lupus, some books say you have a 50% chance of surviving 10 years. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the end. And I allowed myself to grieve for 24 hours, and I said, okay, now I'm going to learn everything I can about it, and I'm going to get up, put one foot in front of the other, and keep going. And as long as I can walk and I can breathe, I'm going to just keep doing what I can do. And sometimes I have to go sit out for 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes I overdo it a bit and have to take a day off. But I know as long as I wake up in the morning and I have a breath and I can put my feet on the floor, I'm not done yet. And I'm not sure how much I'll be able to do, but I'll be able to do something. And sometimes, when I was teaching Vacation Bible School a couple of weeks ago, I challenged the students to go to Walmart or a supermarket and look at people's faces and said, here's an act of service you can do without ever talking to anybody or touching anybody. Smile. If you look, a lot of people don't smile when they're out in public, but a smile is contagious, and you may just brighten a person's day. So even just trying to help children understand that a life of service begins with just a smile, that can have that ripple effect. And I'll never know where it ends, and it's not about me anyway. It's all about what's much bigger than me.
I love that. What do you think service and being passionate about serving others has taught you about yourself?
Oh, gee. That I need to keep my pride in check. I would say that's something I struggle with, because pride is a two-edged sword. You can be very prideful and it's all about me, or look how well I did this, or hey, you did a great job with this, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not why I did it though.
Right.
Let me step back.
Ego.
And the other way, you can also become prideful in being too humble. Some people put on an act of humility, and it'll actually draw them more attention. So that's something I know in my personality I need to keep in balance, and that's a big struggle for me, is to make sure I'm keeping it in check. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I think it's a struggle for pretty much everybody, because you want to be humble. You don't want to let your ego run you, but you also want to be authentic.
And that is another word I am using in my own lexicon about my discovery of who I am. At this age, I'm trying to be authentic. And if I don't like how you treated me, I'm going to try and speak up in a nice way and say, I don't like what you said, I don't like how you said it, and I would prefer you not talk to me that way again. So authenticity is something, another layer I am trying to make part of my being internally.
We're always working on ourselves, aren't we?
Yes.
That's the best part.
Again, as long as we have air to breathe and feet to put on the floor and a mind that can be aware of what the day is, we're not done yet.
What is your favorite memory of serving? What is the most memorable?
Ooh. One particular incident. It's so hard to choose because I've had such a full life and I've been so blessed. Well, one that comes to mind I can come up with right away. When I was younger, Bob and I were volunteering at an emergency squad, and we were dispatched to a cardiac arrest at a church down the street. And we got there, and the patient had no heartbeat and wasn't breathing. And we continued CPR that had been started by a bystander. The paramedics were right behind us. He and I were just EMTs at the time. And the patient was revived right there in the aisle of the church. He had been walking his daughter down the aisle and had a massive heart attack, what we call sudden death. And we revived him right there in the church. He was able to tell his daughter, go ahead and get married. I'll see you at the ER. And I still get chills thinking about it.
I have chills all over my body right now.
I'm getting all emotional, and this is 30 some years ago. And we transported him to the hospital, and he was wide awake and able to talk to his daughter and hug her. She went on and got married, and he was discharged from the hospital 4 days later, no neurological deficit. So I would say that was a pretty good moment.
I think so. I'll never forget it, and I wasn't even there.
That made all those hours of training and worth every bit of it. Even if that was the only save I ever had, that made all those hours of training and volunteer time worth it.
I always say to people, my whole thing is to get them to act, right? So I say envision something for yourself first, then explore what it would take to do it. And both of those things don't cost any money, right? Just imagine,
brainstorming.
Yeah, brainstorming, maybe some research, some time, and then execute a plan and take that first step. So what kind of advice would you give people on the service front to get them out there serving?
I think you need to spend time in reflection and either write a list if you're more left brain. If you're more right brain, do mind mapping. And if you don't
Here comes the teacher.
If you don't know what mind mapping is, there's a lot of resources online. You put in mind mapping, and basically it's just drawing a picture of all the things that are important to you. And start with that. And then think about things that make you excited. I always think about when I've put too much in my schedule and I have to step back and say, okay, I got to let something go. I look at all the different things and say, okay, when I'm done with that task, when I was done with that task, how did I feel? Was I energized or was I drained? So if washing the dishes energizes you, find someplace you can go help out by washing dishes. If cleaning a closet and organizing your soup cans and all the things in your pantry, if you feel excited and that you have a sense of accomplishment from that, go volunteer at a pantry. Food pantries need help. So if the firefighters are at a fire and you just happen to be somebody who feels energized when you clean, especially if you clean for somebody else, call the fire department up. I mean, you can sign up and be a support person. That is technically my title. And it just means I do whatever I can do. I do whatever I can within my limits. So I might go up and clean dishes. I might go up and clean pike poles. I might go up and clean fire gear. I did laundry. It sounds like a minor thing, but it was something they needed done and didn't have time to do themselves, and freed them up to do other things.
Right. And you know what? Something else that you just made me think about as we're having this conversation about what people can do as far as serving is, I think sometimes we get, maybe the word is bored, or, with whatever our job is. But if we look at what our job is and we have a skill that we're bringing to the table, for example, when I was an English teacher, right? And you are a speech teacher. I mean, we can always use our skills and our strengths in a volunteer service basis. I could volunteer to help people write college essays. I could volunteer to help, tutor.
There are so many people that need help with literacy skills.
Right. And no matter what your job is.
Whatever you do, you
Exactly.
have been gifted with something.
Especially in this day and age, people who have IT skills, like computer skills, they could really volunteer in a way that would be so meaningful to those people that they helped. So,
senior citizen centers, you can go in and teach them how to use their iPads and smartphones.
We were just talking about that. I actually was talking about that on the drive over here with the girls. I said, I feel like, because senior citizens may not even know what an app is for their, to get something, even to play a game, that they can get an app, put it on an iPad. They wouldn't even know that, Mm-hmm. And so just to download it, put it on and show them how to do it, I mean, that could be life-changing for somebody. I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. It really was great to know you. And I know that you're inspiring people to get involved, because most people who want to, right, they know that they want to. And the thing is that sometimes we just need to encourage them to say that your help, as big or small, is needed, and you are welcomed, no matter what or where it is.
There are so many simple things. Even if you can't leave your home, contact the elementary school. Beginning of the school year is coming. There's teachers that need things cut out, and simply like that.
Absolutely.
There are so many things. So yes, as long as you breathe and you can think, there's something you can do to help someone.
And if somebody would like to reach out to you, can I make you a part of our private group?
Sure.
Motivate Me Ultimate Support System?
Sure. Email is a great way to get a hold of me, messaging through Facebook, something like that.
What is your email address? You want to share that?
las1088@gmail.com.
Okay, awesome. And Laurie Staples on Facebook, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Laurie.
My pleasure.
And I talk to you, 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 and we love, and we hate, and we demonstrate, we try to relate. This is my breakthrough. Whoa. Said now, this is my breakthrough. Whoa. Oh man, this is my breakthrough.